Poonam, I don't recall really one defining moment per se. However, at the core, I believe character is the most important trait of any successful leader. And one important leadership attribute for me was a focus on listening with an intent to learn. I think you need to constantly be curious. I quote unquote retired from the 7 by 24, always on, always connected financial services industry. What I recognized is over 36 years of experience, there's a fair amount of value in that you don't really realize you have until you step back. And I drive by my kids' school where they grew up going to school, and I realized that I probably picked them up and dropped them off a handful of times. We moved 72,000 employees to remote work, and we delivered, as you well know, in the area you are, highly accelerated digital capabilities. The organization just felt flatter to me. You didn't have a feeling of all the hierarchy.
Hello, knock knock, and welcome to Beyond the Legacy, a podcast where we dive into stories, reflections, and wisdom of leaders who have left their mark and are now exploring life beyond the titles. I'm your host, Poonam Garg. I'm thrilled to kick off this journey with you. This podcast is about more than career highlights, it is about transition, the impacts, and the questions, that arises after the spotlight fades and what it truly means to build a legacy that lasts. Today, I'm honored to welcome Jeff von Gillern to the show. Jeff is the former executive vice chair of technology and operations at US Bank, where he spent over 2 decades leading technology and operation, playing a key role in banking digital transformation and enterprise modernization. Jeff currently serves as a board of director at NCR Atleos. Who doesn't know about what is NCR Atleos? I want to give them a little blurb. It's a global leader in the ATM and self-service banking operation technology. Jeff also serves on the board of Children's Minnesota, which is very close to my heart, and where he contributes to one of the largest pediatric healthcare system in the Midwest. What stands out about Jeff is the way he leads. And that's where I am inspired by him. He's with like clarity, calm, and a focus on empowering people. And that's where Jeff stole my heart too. His legacy is as much as about building system, but also the people he inspired. So Jeff, welcome to Beyond the Legacy.
Poonam, it's a privilege to be here today with you. Thank you.
Let's talk about the leadership journey and evaluation, Jeff, because that is how it starts from you. So, Jeff, you had really remarkable leadership career, and have seen that in the past. Can you take us back at to defining moment that shaped your leadership style? And was there a turning point which really changed your leadership or your leadership philosophy, the way you lead?
Poonam, I don't recall really one defining moment per se. However, at the core, I believe character is the most important trait of any successful leader. And I would say my leadership style evolved over the years as I learned more and I experienced more. One important leadership attribute for me was a focus on listening with an intent to learn. I think you need to constantly be curious. And close seconds would be traits of humility and transparency that I think are important for leaders.
That's amazing, Jeff. Now, since you have talked about little bit leadership philosophy, let's talk about your life after corporate retirements, right? So the big question I do have always, which is the curious questions. I have 2 or 3 curious questions, like life after corporate retirement, what it looks like. So big. The first question is like, what inspired you to transition out from the corporate world? Was it planned, or did something change or shift from your side over a period of time which makes you to transition from the corporate world?
I quote unquote retired from the 7 by 24, always on, always connected financial services industry. And I did 12 years at Visa International and 24 years at US Bank. So that was my retirement. And I had always kind of planned to work till around 2025 was my goal. Because that was when my last child was going to be out of the house and in college. And then it ended up working out well at US Bank. We did an acquisition, as you know, of Union Bank, and the timing of that, I stayed for the acquisition, and that became our number one priority. And then we positioned the organization for a very smooth transition after that. So I've been retired for about the last year and a half, been able to kind of step back and transition. And like you talked about in the introduction, I joined two boards, and then I do some advisory work for a private equity firm. And it's been an adjustment for me because the day-to-day grind, the 7 by 24, as you well know, and you're still in the midst of it. It's different when you go on a board, and I've been learning, along the way as well. As you transition, a board role is more strategic. It's more governance versus day-to-day management. But it also, what I recognized is over 36 years of experience, there's a fair amount of value in that you don't really realize you have until you step back, decompress, and in a board environment, you're able to share perspectives. You're able to share, lessons learned, because I made a lot of mistakes, and I tried to learn from the mistakes, and I try to share some of that with other people to prevent mistakes and to lead and to innovate and so forth. So it's a different perspective. You look through a different lens than you do in a day-to-day execution role. Therefore, you're creating impact in a different way.
So, how did your retirement change your perspective on leadership, or is it remain same even before that?
It's remained the same. I'm a big believer in people and leading people with integrity. But it hasn't changed. I think maybe how I approach things in a board environment is different than it would be in a day-to-day operating environment. And like I said, I'm learning too. This is a different phase for me. I'm on a public company board, and I'm also, as you mentioned, on a nonprofit board, and those are two very different things. Both of them are very important. One of them has financial fiduciary responsibilities to public shareholders and customers. The other is very community involved and has challenging financial dynamics that are different than a public company. But I like the balance of those two things. And the children's Minnesota is one of the top pediatric care facilities in the world, and I had the privilege of joining that board. And I'd always wanted to give back. My daughter was born there with some severe difficulties, and they really saved her life the first 8 months of her life. And so she's a thriving 20-year-old sophomore in college now and doing great. And I always wanted to be able to give back, but I didn't really have the time. And now I have the time to do that. And it's been very rewarding.
So, this is Poonam's question, Jeff. This is Poonam's insights. So, now you have had some time in retirement. And are there things that you have learned or realized that you wish you knew when you were really thick in your corporate world, right? Maybe something would you have like helped you carve out an earlier or more intentional path of retirement?
I think my first reaction to that question is upon reflection, and I've been retired a little over a year now, year and a half probably. And I drive by my kids' school where they grew up going to school, and I realized that I probably picked them up and dropped them off a handful of times because I was always gone in the morning before they got up. I was always gone, when they came home from school. My wife luckily was there, with them more than I was. So upon reflection, I was like, where did that time go? And that would be one. Everybody kind of overuses the term. I need better balance in my life. I just would have probably, in reflecting, uh, I got caught up a lot in the corporate, and I was very focused on it. It was a key priority for me, but I would have probably wanted to have a little bit more balance with family in retrospect. Yeah, I'm pleased with how everything turned out. Got great kids, great family. I've had a rewarding work experience, but and you know it from the role you're in. We're on the phone all the time or texting, and it's constant. And I probably wasn't as present, as I could be. So I'd work a long day. I'd come home and I'd still be looking at email and text, as you well know from our experience there, because we're so dedicated to the success we wanted at the bank.
Yep, that's true. Now it's a more because you have led the bank during the COVID time and you have witnessed, and even majority of my listener also have witnessed the COVID-19. So now let's talk about the reflection of the leadership philosophy over the post COVID-19 times. So the big question is like because we all witnessed the COVID-19, and COVID-19 has really reshaped the work and the life for so many. The way we used to work and now we work, it's totally different, right? So the big question I do have, and definitely what I do have, and definitely like my kind of leaders is also thinking about like that, and we have seen that, and we are seeing this pattern. Did it influence your decisions to retire or redirect your energy toward new goals?
When I think back to COVID, it's just amazing what we all went through, and the lessons that we carry forward out of that. I still find myself telling stories, with people. Oh, do you remember when this, or do you remember when that? And the other thing that kind of comes to mind is I thought I was done doing all-nighters, right? I'd earned my career. I was at the later part of my career, and in COVID, I actually did all-nighters. And sometimes it wasn't that I could add any value, but my whole team was working all night, to get the lending in for the small businesses and all the different types of things that we had to do. So we just all did extraordinary things. And I think what I reflect on is, we executed what would have been the impossible prior to COVID. And I'll just give you a couple examples. We had 5 physical customer call centers around the United States and in Europe. Yeah, over 5,000 employees there. And we moved that to a work for home model, remote model, in 8 days. And we would have never done that. I mean, we would have had to review it with the regulators and the auditors, and we would have tested it for 6 months. But we did it. And we did it with quality, and we did it with appropriate controls. We didn't blow the place up. And so, amazing things happened. We moved 72,000 employees to remote work, and we delivered, as you well know, in the area you are, highly accelerated digital capabilities for our customers. And what I learned from it was, we had areas, some people look at it and say productivity went down. In a lot of what you and I did, our productivity almost doubled. If you looked at the code velocity release rates that we were doing, people were working all night. Developer productivity, we had to worry about burnout, obviously, but we had just tremendous teamwork. The other observation I had is the organization just felt flatter to me. You didn't have a feeling of all the hierarchies. I was on calls, with all levels of the organization, and we were being dynamic, we were being fluid. The words that come to mind are adapt and adjust, and I think, we had to do a lot of that. And there was other parts of the businesses that had to almost go on a pause because they were customer facing and they couldn't get out in the field as much, and so they had different experiences. But in our case, I think we learned a lot from it that we can apply in the future, and I'm hoping, that we've adjusted some of those things as we go forward and take those benefits. I'd say on the negative side, or the learning side, our internship program suffered as we brought the young people in, young men and women that joined our internship that first year. It was tough to get them connected, and that's such an important part of that environment. And we learned things that we could do to get more connected. But younger people coming into the workforce, it's hard to collaborate and connect and get a feel of corporate life when you're remote. And so I think we did a number of things to get better at that, but that was one of the areas that was a struggle, and I don't think we were probably as effective at it as we could be. And we're all still going through changes, and I don't think it's ever going to go back to the way it was. But you have certain companies that are forcing return to work, and then they're reversing it, and so there's just a lot of ebbs and flows still as a result of COVID. But I think we learned a lot, and we proved that we can do things we didn't otherwise think we could do.
So, talking about this, because it seems like that was a challenging or critical period of a time that we all went through. So, big question is like, what leadership qualities do you think like the person should have to meet those critical times?
Yeah, I think you have to be able to adapt, and you have to be able to change, adapt. I think you have to listen to what the organization's telling you. You can't always do things the way that you're used to doing things. And sometimes people that are closer to the issue or closer to the challenge need to be trusted, and just, we need to make a pivot. We need to make a change. And I learned that was an important part in the organization. And I think the other benefit of that is people appreciate to be heard and appreciate to be empowered. And I'd say the other big word would be empowerment.
Okay. Now let's talk about giving back, because this is a podcast like we need to give back to the community and build a legacy. So as I have seen in your as I have introduced you and calling out like some of the projects and causes that you are passionate about, like your work with NCR or Children's Minnesota. Do you have any other projects beside that? Or I would say, are there any opportunities for others, specifically for our listeners, to get involved in the work you are doing now, whether that is serving on board, mentoring, or supporting community causes?
Yeah, I've had the luxury of being able to do this transition from retirement and kind of pick some things that I think I can add value on, but I can also learn from, because I think that's important to me. It's a two-way street to continue to do that. So in addition to the two boards that we talked about already, a couple other thoughts come to mind. I have joined a private equity firm and have been doing some advising on transactions that they're doing in the financial services industry. And I can only bring my knowledge or perspective. So if you think about a big pie chart, I'm a small piece of the pie, but I contribute what I can. And but I get to learn from all that other experience that's around the table as they look at investing in companies and so forth. And I've enjoyed that because I've learned from it. I've also had something I can contribute to it. The other thing that I found rewarding was I've been able to speak to business school classes, several of them, and I've really enjoyed that. And it's not just me talking to them, it's us together. I had one of them was a panel where I got interviewed in a panel type environment with questions. The other was an MBA class that we came in and talked about specific challenges in our career and what we did to get through those. But I really enjoy the two-way dialogue from that audience too, and I feel like I can contribute, but I'm also learning, because the business classes now are very different than when I went through. And I think that the last thing would be, I still get involved with mentorship with several people and that I've known for a long time, and it's not quite as frequent as it used to be, but I'm still there and I'm still available, and I think that adds value because I continue to learn as their careers develop. And then the reverse of that is I had a mentor that was somebody that I had a lot of respect for, that knew me very well, told me what I needed to hear, not what I wanted to hear a lot of times. And he passed away recently at 85. And so I don't have that mentor anymore. So I've gone through kind of that transition, but I'm trying to give back, to others where I can.
Okay, so closing question for this segment where we are giving back and building the legacy. How do you define the legacy now? And what does it mean to you at this stage of your life? Because you have pretty much involved into big advisory board members and definitely came out from retirement. So does that legacy still remain same, or is it still into the transitions like Poonam? I'm still figuring out, because I'm learning.
Yeah, I'm still figuring it out, and I'm learning. So that's kind of the way, and I hope it's always that way. That's how I would look at it. I can say with all honesty that I gave it everything I had at my job, and there were obviously things I wish I did different sometimes or done in a different way, but I tried to adjust, pivot, and learn from that. But I did feel like I gave it all I had, and so that part of it's behind me. I don't really have an interest in going back to a 7 by 24 operating environment as much as I do want to leverage that experience in a different type of role like I'm doing right now, but continuing to evolve that and continuing to learn.
Now, advice for this is a segment which I usually give an opportunity to my listeners. This is an advice you will get directly from JVG. Big question I do have, like, what advice would you like to give us, like us as an emerging leader, to find their voices in today's evolving workplace?
I think it's really important to surround yourself with outstanding people and outstanding leaders. So look at who you're spending your time with and try to, align yourself with people that you respect and aspire to. I would also seek a trusted and experienced mentor that really, knows you and believes in you and your potential. And then two other things just come to mind. One would be patient, have a long-term view. I was not patient sometimes, and I wanted to move to the next thing, or I wanted to get the bigger job, and I learned that I needed to get deeper roots so I didn't blow over when the wind got strong. And so patience was, and that's one of the things that the mentor I had would tell me. He said, just be patient. These things are going to work out for the right thing. And then the last thing I just say is trust your instincts.
Mm-hmm. Now, and there is a follow-up question here. This is my question. So, if you were starting your career today with everything you know right now, what would you do differently?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I probably followed my brother and my dad into my career because that's what they did. And I could honestly say, I don't think I sat back and said, is that the path I really want to go? So that was, that's probably lesson number one. The other thing is, I always thought I'd go back and get a master's in business. But I got into my career and the opportunity cost of stepping back a little bit and going back to school, I never did it, and I don't regret it because this was early in my career at Visa International. I was working around the world, and I was getting great experience. But in reflection, those are two things. Did I get into this career because my dad worked at IBM and was in the computer business, and my brother did the same thing? I was at IBM in college in an intern program, and then ended up at Visa. So those are probably the two reflections as I think about your question.
Now, this is the closing because this video podcast is just only for 20 minutes. So before we wrap up, I would go with a rapid fire round, which is like pam pam. So one word that describes your leadership journey, or one word that 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 you would like to give yourself.
Integrity.
Integrity. And what do you want to be remembered for in one sentence?
Leadership.
Okay. So, Jeff, thank you so much for sharing your insights, stories, and wisdom. You have set the tone beautifully for this series and reminded us what it meant to lead with purpose and finish well. To our listener, thank you for joining us on this very first episode of Beyond the Legal Safe. If Jeff's story inspired you, don't forget to subscribe and share this episode with someone who is thinking about their next chapter. Definitely, I learned one thing: patience. So, because sometimes I become sometimes impatiently and asking for something, but it looks like yes, leadership also comes with patience. Thank you.